Nighttime on Still Waters. This is NB 506812, narrowcasting into the night from somewhere on Britain's waterways. 12th of March, Wednesday. The day winds down. The last walk along the canal side. Pebbled rings form in the open water. A kick of sleet drives against my face. Captivated by the golden sun shining through rain mist, such unimagined golds. Behind me, a pale rainbow bows and fades to such majesty. The moon, just past full, is climbing in the east, following the lamp of Venus as she shepherds her across the sky. The air is still and sharp-edged with the chill of night. This is the narrowboat Erica, narrowcasting into the quiet darkness of an early spring night, to you, wherever you are. It's so lovely to see you, and I'm really glad that you could make it. And please excuse the clutter. We've had quite a few weeks of it on the Erica recently. Last weekend, Donna found a water leak, and we tracked it down to the pump, but this being a boat, everything is hidden away in the most inaccessible places, and we thought we'd sorted it out when this morning Donna found another one, much more serious one this time. It was filling the bow compartment where the water tank's situated, with lots of water. Hopefully now we've sorted it out, but we're still trying to dry everything out again, and things are piled up everywhere. So we're podcasting rather in extremis tonight. Nevertheless, the stove is on, the cabin is cozy, the kettle is singing, and the welcome is warm. So why don't you step inside out of the cold and welcome aboard? Spring sunshine. Sparrows and blue tits playing leapfrog over branches through the alder copse. Warmth carried on the back of a soft breeze. White plum blossom perfumes the evening air with honeyed wine and sun-filled promises. I spot the first dandelion of the season, the large friendly profile of a solitary bee busily content in his solitude. A pipistrelle bat darting over the sallow saplings. The sun picking out the high branches of the tallest alder and painting them bronze and silver. The scents and sounds of early spring are everywhere, even if at first glance winter's grip on the hedge and field is still clearly evident. A little way down from us, someone has planted a clutch of dwarf daffodil bulbs that are now glowing yellow and orange warmth just below the parapet of one of the numerous accommodation bridges that appear along this stretch of canal. Accommodation bridges are often the small bridges that were built by the canal companies in compensation to farmers whose lands was being bisected by the canal, and to enable them to continue to move livestock from one field to another. Spikes of yellow flag spear the bankside water's edge, with the oily detritus of winter, both human and natural, collect and fester. Their presence may be easily overlooked right now, but even still, there's something uncompromisingly resilient in their appearance. They're like a green forest of Excaliburs held aloft by the hand of white samite-clad spring. This is spring's fighting talk. The great unstoppable green tsunami of spring is on its way, washing out the last of winter at 3 miles per hour, north-northwest. Oh yes, I have heard the roar of spring, and it is fearful. And all along the towpath that drumbeat of awakening is heard. Green shoots, unfurling leaves, fresh flushes of glossy rich greens, cow parsley, lords and ladies, celandine, coltsfoot, hogweed, nettle, angelica, cleavers, ranunculi, ground ivy, dandelion looking like rabbit's ears, plantain, herb robert, chervil, and above our heads leaf buds are cracking and bursting. And the elder, always one of the first, is already decked in tight clusters of mint green leaves. But this is March, and of course the glorious butter-soft warm spring days didn't last. The lap of winter's retreating tide is still to be felt. Sleet, some half-hearted snow flurries, sharp morning frosts, and the return of that biting wind has caused many of us here to ask, did we really have those lovely warm weather last week, so that we were walking around without the need of sweaters or jumpers? But in truth, it's not surprising. And I can hear Dad saying even now, aha, blackthorn winter never fails. Although the microclimate here is a little later than elsewhere and the blackthorn blossoms have yet to show, such sharp changes in weather are to be expected. And as our old friend Miles Hadfield so sagely remarks in his An English Almanac, it's been said by a scientist that March shows a hasty panorama of seasons, before going on to warn us that some of the worst blizzards we have suffered were in March. And so we grab the moments when we can. But knowing that winter is wounded and spring is spoiling for a fight, and that the twilight hours ring and swirl with rook and jackdaw dance and call. And I'm sure that the ducks feel it too, the push and pull of hormone and light. I catch them from time to time, singularly or in pairs, sitting in the water, centre stream. Not asleep, or even dozing, just gently treading the water, watching, listening, sensing, being. The young drakes, slightly at a loss, often grouped together in 2s or 3s, not yet paired, still to learn to read life as well as they can now read the unseen currents of water and air. It can't be easy for them. One unattached drake swims up the centre of the canal. Every few seconds he makes a call. Texts and fun factoid books will tell you that only female ducks can quack. This is not true. Males vocalize as much as females, just a little differently. He swims up toward a paired couple who are swimming in the other direction. I watch, expecting a kerfuffle. The male and the female keep looking at each other. I can sense tension or a sense of unease. I can hear them, softly clucks and chuckling noises. And now the drake pushes just a little ahead of the female. Still eye contact and a few quiet vocalizations. The oncoming young male moves over to the right. Even ducks seem to know canal boating etiquette. And as he draws level, the pair stops swimming. The single male slows, and as he passes, the pair pivot and swim a few strokes alongside, before turning back and swimming off together, their bodies almost touching. And then, almost immediately, around the corner, another unpaired male is swimming. And this time it's easier to see his use of calming signals, those body movements that seem to be universally used and understood across all species, to say, "Do not be afraid. I am not a threat. My presence does not mean you harm." Conflict avoidance strategies, signs of de-escalation, signs which only it seems in humans, or by some humans, taken to be signs of weakness. As he approaches the couple, the lone drake keeps looking away, swimming with his face pointed toward the left bank, slowing down, and now arcing around to the left. The paired drake swims towards him. The lone male stops, lifts his left wing, and starts to preen, running his beak through his richly coloured pinion feathers. How many times have you seen two dogs approach each other, for one of them to suddenly stop, sit down, and scratch or groom themselves? This is a duck that wants no conflict, that is doing everything in his power to avoid aggressive contact. And as he passes, the paired male makes a wide circle around, like a sheepdog on the outrun, and for a few strokes follows him, with neck lowered in warning. The lone drake swims on, strong strokes that make the water rise up his chest. And a little later he takes to the wing to fly the short distance down the canal to join his unattached male. Nicely done, boys. Nicely done. And in the distance, a woodpecker rattles out a morning tattoo. It's always really lovely to hear from you, so thank you to everyone who has contacted me. And hello to Margaret, and a very special hello to Dizzy the cat. Margaret, I love the photograph of him listening to the podcast. He's brilliant. Welcome aboard, Dizzy. And speaking of four-legged listeners, hello to Bodhi and of course to LJ. Hope all's well with you. And hello also to Jason and Karen and Tracy Thomas. And hello and welcome also to Steve Ford, and I'm really glad that you're enjoying the podcast, Steve. And Lee, thank you so much for the videos and pictures that you sent me. The cranes are absolutely spectacular. To see so many in one place must just be really awe-inspiring. And the bald eagle pictures are also incredible. And I know I mentioned in passing in the last episode about the elk that have been coming up to your cabin and the wonderful photographs that you've been managing to take of them. I just wanted to include your beautiful description of one of your encounters with them, as I think the listeners will really enjoy and appreciate it. And it throws a lovely window open to your life up there in the mountains of Colorado. Today, as I did my daily hike up the mountain across from my cabin with the more energetic of my two dogs, I heard a clatter of rocks from the steep mountainside to my right. I stopped and looked and saw the elk herd about 60 meters to the right, among the thick conifers and rock outcroppings. When I had seen that herd in the meadow a couple of days ago, I counted about 60 of them, so I presumed there were that many up there. And even that far away from me, they were wary and started moving away. So I went on up the mountain so as not to disturb them further. On my way back down, I saw that they were still in about the same place. And even though at that point they must have been about 70 meters away, I was directly downwind and could actually smell them. A not unpleasant musky odor. They were very aware of my presence, and as my path bent closely to 50 meters away, they once again moved off. these elk were truly wild. Not the sort to hang about in people's yards in broad daylight as some herds do. It was marvellous and reminded me of why I love living here. Even as I approach 70 and continue to deal with the undeniable hardships of living alone in a poorly insulated cabin on the shady side of a mountain at 8,000 feet, heated primarily with wood, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Much of my summers are spent cutting, dragging, splitting and stacking wood, and much of my summers are spent throwing more logs on the fire and wishing the house were warmer. But still, I wrap up in a blanket and count my blessings. Oh, thank you, Lee. Thank you for taking us along with you. That must have been marvellous. And greetings to John McMahon and Rebecca Cook and to Tanya Yorgay on YouTube. And Tanya, I loved your comment. You said, thank you for the cuppa and for introducing all of your lovely eclectic friends. Even though we may never meet physically, I feel I'm a better human for knowing you all. Thank you, Tanya. Yes, I know exactly what you mean by that connection with people that physically you haven't and probably never will ever meet. And yet there is that sense of connection. And just knowing that there are those who are like-minded and like-hearted all across the globe is something that's become very important to me in staying grounded. So thank you. And a really warm welcome and greetings to Gabriela Maria Rodriguez-Veinotte. Is that how you pronounce it? Or Veinotte? Please let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Greetings to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Gabriela. First of all, thank you so much for becoming a Lockwheeler, and it's entirely fine that it's for a limited period. However, most of all, thank you so much for such a lovely review and your really kind words. Thank you also to whoever it was that's mentioned the podcast on Reddit. I'm extremely grateful to you. And I'm grateful to you, Gabriela, for passing on the word about us. And I was particularly taken by your mention of seasonal sounds, as it's something that's been very much on my mind too. Yeah, I am planning to include more. It really is a matter of just having time and being around at the right time. Recording sounds, and Mike Bullock might back me up on this, trying to record sounds is a little bit like taking photographs. When the perfect picture or the perfect sound appears, you never have the equipment with you or to hand. So I am working on it, and keep your ears open because I do plan to include a lot more soundscapes. Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much to all of our Lockwheelers. And they are Gabriela Maria Rodriguez-Veinotte, Kevin B., Fleur and David Mcloughlin, Lois Raphael, Tanya Yorgay, Andrea Hansen, Chris Hines, David Durham, Chris and Alan on the narrowboat The Land of Green Ginger, Captain Arlo, Rebecca Russell, Alison on the narrowboat Maka, Derek and Pauline on Silver Fox, Anna V, Orange Cookie, Mary Keane, Tony Rutherford, Arabella Holzapfel, Rory with MJ and Kayla, Narrowboat Precious Jet, Linda Reynolds Perkins, Richard Noble, Carol Ferguson, Tracy Thomas, Mark and Tricia Stowe, and Madeline Smith. Thank you. Ebb tide, thin rain, the scent of marsh mud and salt spray. Time stretches and pools, eddying around Dad's bed. False teeth in a glass catch the dying light. Hoarse breath, dim eyes filled with unseen sight. Sitting without thoughts beneath the unticking clock. thin rain, waiting for the sound of geese in flight. Ebb tide. I wrote that last year, almost to the day. That long afternoon and the even longer, eternal evening of half light when Dad died. Not knowing what to think, not knowing what to feel. Only that there were no thoughts in my head, and a numbness that sank through my body. Of wanting time to speed up, to get this over with, while at the same time wanting to hold it back, to stop the clock, to stop the inevitable wave from coming, to never having to miss hearing, "Hello, lad. What were the roads like?" And now a year has gone by, and last week I heard the news of another death. The death of a good friend that I've never met. There's a strange feeling of confluence here, of circles being drawn, of the asymmetry of emotions beginning to find some sort of balance, of disparate coloured strands being woven together. Can loss, can grief, in whatever odd nature it chooses to express itself, end up forming a tapestry of restoration? Perhaps. Maybe. I ask that because I'd already made a decision not to mark the anniversary of Dad's death here on this podcast. I personally felt that I'd covered it enough, and that there is a thin line to be drawn relating to morbidity. And I also know that a number of listeners have griefs of their own, and they're encountering and navigating. And perhaps this is not the time nor the place to rehash mine. I did, however, and I will continue to do so, plan to celebrate the life of Mum and Dad in the next few episodes, when I'm going to read some extracts from Mum's book relating to part of their life that I have a feeling you're going to find really interesting and enjoy. But hearing that news of the death of Clifford has rather changed my thoughts. You see, both Dad and Clifford were absolutely pivotal in me starting this podcast. Them and one other one. Without them, there would be no Nighttime on Still Waters. Without them, the inspiration to format in this way, to find the tone and the register, would just not have developed. And without them, I would not have persevered in those early months. Although I never really knew how much Clifford actually listened to them. I knew he had listened to one or two. And I know I've gone through all this elsewhere, but the idea of recording a short weekly audio journal of our new life on the cut aboard the narrowboat Erica originated really from the need to just keep family and some friends up to date on how we were progressing. In other words, because we knew that communication was not going to be so straightforward, to just reassure them that we'd neither sunk nor drowned, something which I got the distinct impression for some of them they were convinced was going to happen to us. And recording a 4 or 5 minutes audio journal seemed to me to be the easiest and least onerous way to keep in touch. To my mind, much easier than having to write copious emails. So, okay, there I've said it. The origination of this podcast was due entirely to my laziness. However, as is often the case in my head, ideas grow, and the 4 or 5 minutes chat began to develop into thinking about creating a podcast. And to cut a long and rambling story short, I read that one of the most important things in setting up a podcast is to have an imagined ideal listener. And in the early days, I had two in mind, and one of those was Clifford. Clifford shared my love for old-style radio, and we chatted on and off about it for quite a long time. And having Clifford as my listener helped me to select the tone and to identify the topics that I thought would appeal to his huge range of interests, and also to play along to certain conceits, like the weather log shipping forecast. And in those first episodes, it helped having him sitting across from me on the other side of the microphone in my mind's eye. And following each recording, I'd ask myself, would Dad or Clifford have found it interesting? And if I thought so, then for me, that marked a good episode. And so I think I do need to mark Dad's death here, because he was also so important to this podcast, just as I needed to mark Clifford's. And Tanya made a great point in her comment that I mentioned earlier. Although never having met a person, they can still have a great impact on your life. And Clifford was one of those. Hearing of his death is strange. How do you mark the loss of someone you only met across a computer screen? And Amanda Keynes on Instagram expressed it so well in her description of losing a similar online friend, that it's a strange, formless grief. And that's so right. We have no formal way of, or even language, to articulate and acknowledge, or perhaps even recognize a loss like this. By their very nature, online relationships can be, in some ways, deeper than face-to-face ones. Now, I know that you don't meet the whole person, only what they choose to share, but that goes for face-to-face friendships too. And I know that Clifford and I shared deeply personal thoughts and struggles that I would find hard to express face-to-face with my other friends, perhaps with the exception of one or two. It's easy to dismiss online friends as synthetic, artificial and shallow, because that's not always the case. I first met Clifford when an eclectic and informal bunch of us began experimenting with words and images, writing poetry, short prose pieces, creating pieces of artwork, and then sharing them and just having fun. And it was always positive, always really supportive. And Clifford's love of pun and wordplay, only he, for example, would list his place of work on one of his social media platforms as Nanya Business. He was a poet and a musician and an artist and a photographer and a thinker. And there were times that we chatted for hours by keyboard, our words bridging across the Atlantic. Sometimes just pure fun, pretending that I could come over and we could go out and in our imaginations explore the bars of his city, and we build word pictures of what we'd do, who we'd see. Clifford was a night owl. Chronic insomnia and a painful eye condition meant that he'd become a creature of the night. And in our imaginations, we'd visit forgotten bars where the jazz was so laid back it would slither across the sawdust floor. And the one-eyed barman was called Mo, who would dispense whiskey shots in chipped egg cups and send them spinning down the greasy bar like they did in the films. And where a flame-haired siren called Wanda, with bewitching eyes and the voice of Billie Holiday, would quote Kierkegaard and Bukowski to the broken moon while the mad dogs howled down crumbling alleyways. And I'd say that she would fall in love with Clifford, and I would feel him grumble and humph behind his keyboard, like that would ever happen. And we'd go out and get drunk on the jewelled lights that shone on the rain-swept streets as limos with white-walled tyres swished past and neon signs fizzed and flickered above our heads. At other times, we tried to touch the unfathomable. We both in our ways felt outsiders, estranged in a land that we couldn't really comprehend. We found no solutions, but the talking with one another became sometimes solution enough. And in our differences and fractured worlds, we felt almost as brothers. And he had a seemingly limitless range of interests and enthusiasms, including radio, steam trains, and old plate photography. And above all, he loved the clouds. His social media account would usually comprise of just a long scroll of cloud photographs that he had taken. Great turbulent cauldrons of apocalyptic cloud. Candy floss billows castling into unimaginable blue. Great grey and white horsehair manes combed by icy winds at the outer edges of our world. And alongside each photograph, he hated the use of the word image for photograph. Alongside each photograph there would be written a short description of everything that Clifford could see in it. Dragon with snorkel. Head of dog just about to bark. The shaman cloud herders of Tibet can read the clouds. And Clifford could read them too, spinning such characters from them. I could only see grades of grey and abstract shapes, but Clifford could weave such stories from them. And for the past couple of years, I've not been so frequent on social media, but have noticed that more recently he just began to post the photograph, and his friends would write below what they saw. Perhaps I should have picked up that the cloud gatherer was getting ready to leave, handing on the rain to others. I miss Clifford, and I'm sad he's no longer here. I always have imagined him on a summer's day, lying on his back among the long grass of a quietly rolling hillside and looking upwards into a moving sky above, calling out the characters and the stories that emerge for him there. And for him, on that one lark-filled day, his eyes do not pain him and he can see clearly again, and his mind is stilled and gentle. And perhaps he would have understood how much he had given to me and how much richer he had made my world. But I'm going to give the last few words to one of his closest friends, who was also part of that raggle-taggle group of poets just starting out on their journey with words. Meg. A good 20-some-odd years ago, I met a poet online who worked with trains and who loved clouds and sky as much as I do. Over the years we shared poetry and life musings about psychology, writing, caregiving, cats, collections, and music. He became one of my core heart family. He helped me through times of deep sadness, and I tried best I could to be there for him. These are the first hours those who cared for him are finding out about his passing. And I'm grateful to the soul who knew how to call in a welfare check, as I wasn't sure how to coordinate that from New Hampshire all the way to Texas. For many years, on the first of every month, Clifford and I have exchanged the words rabbit, rabbit, rabbit for good luck, as well as untold amounts of cloud photos and long-distance medicine hugs. This was the first month I did not receive a reply, so in my own small way I knew. He said last year that I would be one of the few who noticed his absence from the living. And I did, but my hands and heart were already been so full of my own grief, I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. His loneliness cast him out of his own life in the end. He's not the first heart family I have lost in the last few years. He surely will not be the last. I wish his brain could have been kinder to him, for he will surely be missed by many, and his wise, creative spirit was rare and beautiful and so very bright. Poetic Meg. Yes, thank you, Clifford, for all you've done. And there will always be a part of that great heart of yours in this podcast. But this one thing I wish. Cloud Herder, won't you spin us one last story? For Clifford, you and Dad are missed, and I'm thankful for all that you have meant to me. You will both remain a part of my world. Thin rain, ebb tide. But now the tide turns, the flood tide begins, and the wave of spring approaches. This is the narrowboat Erica signing off for the night and wishing you a very restful and peaceful night. Good night. Temperature outside 1.3 degrees. Inside 20 degrees. Humidity 73%. Dew point -2 degrees. Wind direction 8 miles per hour. Wind strength north-northeast. Barometric pressure 1024.4 rising. Cloud cover 10%. Cloud ceiling none. Precipitation nil. Moon phase waning gibbous 97.6%. Day length 11 hours 51 minutes. Sunset 18:12. Sky casting 6:18.